Welcome to the Connection Practice podcast, where empathy, insight, and science come together to help you find peace within and harmony in your relationships. Join me for inspiring conversations and a practical skill that brings emotional safety, clarity, compassion, and connection to your life. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Connection Practice podcast. Today I'm honored to have as my guest Vincent Guilamo-Ramos. He is a psychiatric nurse practitioner and a professor. He's also a connection practice coach. And Vincent, I just have so many happy memories of you because you came on a connection practice tour. And of course, that's where you first learned the connection practice. So just welcome. So happy to have you with us today.
It's wonderful to be here, and I'm super excited about our conversation, Rita Marie. Lots of fond memories and lots of things that I'd love to share.
All right. So I'm curious, I don't remember ever really knowing why you decided to take a connection practice tour to start with. I'm sure you had never heard of it before.
No, I hadn't. I actually was introduced to the connection practice through a friend who had a family member who had gone on one of the tours. But I think independent of that, Rita Marie, I had been for some time feeling like I needed to get more connected to myself and my feelings. To be honest, like many people, I think I had been working too much and sort of the pace of life had become too hectic. And there had been so many things that were happening that I kind of was just kind of enduring and pushing forward. I kind of got disconnected from my heart and I wasn't really thinking with the best insight. I was making decisions that were more emotionally, situationally charged. And I just felt like I needed to stop and have some time to reflect. To be honest, I didn't know going to Costa Rica what I would encounter and how important and useful the connection practice has become. But I knew there was something that I needed to work on. And I was hopeful that by going to Costa Rica that I would find some help and some support.
I see. And so could you tell our listeners then, Vincent, about what exactly was it that you experienced during the tour, what you learned from the connection practice and really the whole tour experience? Just elaborate on that if you would.
Well, I think there were a couple of things that were really sort of memorable and important for my experience on the tour. I think maybe I'll start with some of the things that one might expect. And so Costa Rica is beautiful. And just being in Costa Rica, the natural ecosystem, the beauty of the country, the peace and the way in which the country as a whole reflects many of the principles of the connection practice. If you've not been to Costa Rica, definitely it's a place that you want to go visit. You might even stay because it's absolutely enticing and it's an amazing quality of life. Where the tour takes place is beautiful. I think there's a combination of both a community connection to Rita Marie, your home, but there's also privacy with some of the smaller properties that are part of your home but are separate. It allowed me and the people that were visiting to have the right mix of privacy, but also to be connected in a communal experience where we shared meals, where we could play, paddleball, where we could talk and just be together. And obviously the actual program. I think there are lots of places in the world where people can go and see natural beauty and be in community. But what was really kind of quite special was the actual experience of the connection practice. No, I have to be honest, I didn't expect that it was going to have the profound impact that it has had on me. And I think for me, the opportunity to slow down, to really become coherent, which means making sense of what it is that I'm feeling and become a little less cognitive and sort of rational and much more in touch with what's really happening for me emotionally. What are my needs and what are the things that I'm feeling that I, want others to understand and that I myself want to understand about my experience. And I think the connection practice was able to help me do that. And what I found was not only was I developing better insight, but my heart was opening and it was much more sort of empathic for my own or empathetic is probably a better word, much more empathetic for my own kind of whole person of who I am, and like being much more tolerant of the good and the bad and more accepting and able to really kind of nurture myself. But even more importantly, Rita Marie, I was able to be in connection with others, whether they were there or not, because part of the experience is imagining difficult experiences that you've had in your life and then sort of working through them, either within yourself or in relation to someone else. And I think that what was really great was I started to see things that had been heavy and painful, and that I thought there was only one way that it had to be, which often meant my retreating or putting up a wall or becoming angry. I started to see the other side of the experience and to have openness in terms of my heart to better understand, to better feel, to better connect, and ultimately to make better decisions about a way that there could be a win-win as opposed to a winner and a loser, or sometimes it might even be two losers who, in both cases, things don't really work out for either person. That was profound because it gave me a set of tools to then come back to my life back in Washington, D.C., where I live, and to start to apply some of the ideas to my life in many ways, my personal life, my professional life. I want to say to people, boy, does it take practice. It's one thing to understand, and I want to be honest and let folks know that it means really being intentional and deliberate and surrounding yourself in sort of a practice and a community of folks that will support you in being able to implement the connection practice. But it's been amazing and it's kind of solution focused. And it really has helped to kind of push through things that have been hard in my life.
All right. Well, Vincent, since you're a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I know that you've developed a lot of interpersonal skills, and it's so easy to get to know you. You're so accessible and so articulate as well. So I'm curious, in learning the connection practice, what was unique about learning that as compared to some of your previous learning about relationship skills?
It's interesting because you're right. I've spent many years of my life working in mental health. I have talked to many individuals and couples, families, different groups, young people, older people, all different kinds of people. And I think one of the things that I've learned from that experience is how often people get stuck, and no judgments, but sometimes when we're stuck, we're sort of perseverating on sort of a point in whatever that experience is that we can't really move past, that it's hard for us to figure out how to have some connection to how we really feel and more insight about what's happening for us and what's happening for the people that are involved in the situation besides us. And I think what was different about the connection practice is that it provided a very structured way to really apply. And I think the word apply is really important, a set of tools that then can be applied to those times when you kind of feel stuck, which, to be honest, in life, there are many times when I feel stuck. I still feel sometimes stuck, but now I pause and I sort of take a deep breath. I start to reflect on, what's really happening, what is going on in my heart. I take deep breaths and I start to really envision sort of a happier place, something that brings appreciation, and to then think about how whatever it is that was going on, it can be a situation, it could be an interaction with someone, it could be a perceived loss, to sort of connect that tough spot to a feeling of appreciation. And it tends to open me up in ways that I see possibilities and feel things that if you had just asked me in a conversation, including in my sessions with people that I work with, probably the response would have been more consistent with a feeling or a thought that was kind of stuck. And you're able to access an entire different view. And even if you don't sort of come to what many people might think is a concrete solution or plan, somehow it feels different. And in feeling different, in creating more ability to feel and understand your experience and the experience of others, it kind of becomes the path forward in a decision. It doesn't all have to be figured out. It can be that you understand that it's more complicated than just whatever it was that you believed or felt before you took some time to really apply the connection practice.
So it gives you perspective, sounds like. You're really standing back and seeing it more clearly from a different perspective. Is that it?
It gives you perspective, but I think, for folks like myself who tend to have a lot of perspective, not always, but often, it
Mhm.
actually helps you to move beyond just the perspective. You feel differently. And so when you
Okay.
feel differently, your perspective evolves even more. And in fact, it's like imagine something being very heavy and sort of weighing on you. And whether you realize it or not, you're sort of carrying it around a hurt, a disappointment, a loss, a worry. And then somehow it becomes less sort of impactful on your life. And it might still be there, but it doesn't dominate everything. It's sort of you get to see that perhaps there's a different way of feeling about it. Perhaps there's a different path forward. Perhaps your original perspective isn't exactly accurate.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, as a board member, you are aware we have been coming up with a new definition, really, of the connection practice. Over the years, we've tried a variety of definitions because the connection practice is so holistic. It's not easy to capture in one sentence or two exactly what it does. But right now, the definition that we have come up with is that it's a life skill that unites your compassion and wisdom to guide choices and to resolve conflicts and create emotionally safe relationships. So, well, there's a second sentence where we talk about how we learn to access our empathy and insight in order to move toward compassion and wisdom. So, I'm just wondering, does that definition fit your experience, what you just explained to me? Does that land for you?
I mean, I think it's a beautiful way, Rita Marie, to describe what I said. I used a lot of words for folks that are watching this. Boy, did I use a lot of words to explain what
That's
you
all
just did
right.
in one or two sentences. But what I like about it is that once we start practicing sort of the way of telling people in one or two sentences very clearly what the connection practice is, I think more people will get it and they'll understand what I'm saying today has been such a profound experience, but they'll have a language for being able to really see what the potential and the possibilities are. It's definitely a life skill. It definitely helps you to make better choices. It definitely helps you to access, your insight, your compassion, more wisdom, more empathy. And it allows you not only to resolve conflicts with others, which oftentimes that's what brings people to want to pursue something like this, but it also helps you to think about conflicts that we have within ourselves that actually are not necessarily about others, even though they might manifest in the world, but actually there are things that we need to work on. And I think both of those things are true, but sometimes it's harder, Rita Marie, when someone is thinking about coming to Costa Rica or taking one of the courses, it might be harder to kind of face the longer definition of what I was saying earlier when I was first talking about my experience. And I think what's really powerful about the shorter definition is that it kind of offers hope that, life skills to really make better choices and to become more connected with yourself and others to resolve conflicts. Boy, I said it differently, but it's like makes sense. It's like, yeah, that's really something I might benefit from.
All right. Wonderful. Well, for years, Vincent, I have been thinking of my vision for the connection practice and what it could do in the world. And what I would really like to see is where people around the world are turning to the connection practice when they have troubles in the same way that they grab a Kleenex when they have tears. Wouldn't that be something? Where people would really
Right.
understand you have a go-to. When there's troubles, when you have negative emotions, and I just call them troubles or turmoil, when you have that you know what to turn to as automatically as you grab a Kleenex, here we go, right here, Kleenex,
Right.
in case I cry, for tears, so that it occurs to you, oh, I don't have to stay in this uncomfortable situation. Like when I'm tearing, I don't have to
Yes.
be uncomfortable. I know what to do and I can do it. So That's what I'm hoping for, is that someday people understand around the world that there's a go-to that they can use. And with that said, I know that you moved forward to become a certified connection practice coach. Could you tell us why you made that decision, what you were thinking of in becoming a coach?
It's so interesting, Rita Marie, because something about my experience in Costa Rica that I didn't share that I want to share is that everything you just said is true. And I think for me, there was something that was larger. I remember being in Costa Rica and learning about some of what makes Costa Rica different as a country and its commitments to systems of peace and how peace was organized within what had at one time been the Ministry of Peace, and that there were institutions, being higher education institutions. And to be honest, your life's work has been to, really build and scale the connection practice. But I've also considered you somebody who's trying to change systems and who's trying to get systems to adopt some of the principles that are in the connection practice. And I think for me, Rita Marie, and I hope that folks that are listening to this won't hear this the wrong way, but we as a country in the United States and the broader world, we're just having such a hard time with conflict, with being able to have the right skills to come together. We're really fighting along ideologies and identities. And I just felt like by becoming a coach that yes, I could help people, but I wanted to think also about systems and about how if there were all these people that were operating with the connection practice, that wouldn't percolate up to something that was bigger. Because for many of us, we love our communities, our countries, and we're really worried about what's happening and how far we are from one another. And I think connection practice offers not only the individual level impact, but it could be also potential for helping to mobilize entire communities. And how do I know that? I was at your home where you had a number of people that were taking part in the course. And I interacted with people that also live in Costa Rica that have been involved in the connection practice. And the quality of those interactions, the ways that we communicated, the exchanges that we had, the times when we needed to create space for ourselves, but also have our needs kind of be expressed and then also have them met through friendship and through being in a shared experience. That collective experience is sort of like a little microcosm of what it could look like if like a lot of people had the connection practice. It would be a different world. That's kind of my hope and why I joined the board, because I believe in the connection practice. I believe in what you've been trying to do for so long. And I'm really eager for people to hear about it. I want people to believe me because I'm speaking with an open heart and sharing my true experience. And I want more people to join, because then it means that not only will they benefit, but it trickles down to kind of like everybody. And it's a great thing.
I love the way you describe that, Vincent, because that is what's so wonderful, right? Is not only that we learn how to do it and we get connected to ourselves, but then when we have people around us who also are on that wavelength and that we all know how to do this and we all feel emotionally safe with each other, it is such a relief, first of all, and just such a nurturing way to live, an empowering way to live, so that we can really be creative. We learn better, we are more creative, and because we feel we're in this supportive energy field, you could say. And it's just, yeah, very different than in the world in general right now, that's for sure.
Yes.
And actually, just recently, I went through a rough patch, which I know you know as a board member. I had a really difficult hacking experience, and then I had one of our Japanese tour participants climb a tree unexpectedly and then fell out of the tree and had to go and have surgery here in Costa Rica on her face. And, I went through a rough patch. And when we go through that kind of experience, that's when it gets really harder to want to do any inner work. We're so in shock with what is happening in our lives that it's challenging to really be our best in those situations. But because in my life now, I've built around me all these people here in Costa Rica who know exactly how to give me support. Like what you were saying that you experienced in the tour and when you met people in our community here, that because I had all these people around me, that I was able to move through this more efficiently with less suffering. So it's not just being somehow more perfect by knowing the connection practice. It's not about that. We've always said it's not about perfection, it's about connection. So that I was able, with the support of those around me who knew how to help me, that didn't tell me, "Oh, Rita Marie, you should just do this or you should do that or don't worry, it's all good," or whatever platitudes people throw. That instead I got empathy and I got real support from the people around me. And that's the world I want to see. And my world did not used to be like that. Really. I did not have that all my life. I was able to create that kind of world for myself because of learning what I teach. Really, and then having that radiate out into my life. I'm surrounded now by people who not only love me, but know how to support me when I'm going through a rough time.
I mean, that's so profound, Rita Marie. And I do think that it's really important for folks to hear. And I'll, just kind of use myself as a way of sharing, given that we're really talking in a very open way on our time today together. I am not living kind of that particular life that you just described. I'm somebody who is still trying to apply the principles of connection practice to create in my life the kind of support and people and context that I want. And I'm saying that because I know there may be people who are saying, well, that might work for those people, whoever those people are that somehow haven't figured out or that are perfect. But it doesn't really work that way. It's much more about a process, kind of one foot in front of the other, step at a time. And I think what I've appreciated is that I sort of keep on coming back. And there have been times when I've pulled away because the wave of life kind of lands on me and I'm overwhelmed with work or personal commitments. But then I come back and I re-engage. And then suddenly there's this reminder because it's pretty profound that it sort of opens up again the inner journey of like how to keep on moving forward with trying to create the kind of life that you want. And so I just want to say to folks that are listening, it's not like, you have to be perfect. It's not like
Right.
you have to get it all right. You might still get upset or have a bad moment or react, but the good news is you stop. At least know that I have stopped and you start to reflect. And you might not always get it, but you reflect. And then eventually you find that rather than doing what you used to do, sort of almost automatically, you start to incorporate a little different approach.
Yeah, that's so true, Vincent. And I kind of want to go back to your desire to see our systems change. In other words, we change individually and then we begin to create these relationships in our life. And then, it keeps rippling out. One of the things that we do in our current systems is we vote, right? We vote for people. And for me, it seems that the more I learn how to live from my compassion and wisdom, like, I'm not perfect at it, but I have to say I'm better at it now than I used to be. I'm very different from having taught myself this practice.
Yeah.
I'm a very different person than I was over 20 years ago. Let's just put it that way. But anyway, as I've grown in learning to live from that intersection of compassion and wisdom, I am more able to recognize other people who are at least aiming to live from that too. And that's true not only in the people I meet in my everyday life, but when I hear a leader talk, somebody who wants to be elected, for example, I am more able to tune in to whether they are living from that same place or at least aiming to. Like I've said, nobody's perfect at it. It's a step-by-step journey, just like you've said. At the same time, the more I grow, the more I recognize that growth in others. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I know who to vote for.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And then if we vote for people that are living from that awareness, from that intersection of compassion and wisdom, then we're going to end up having a world and our systems that are more reflective of that inner state.
Yep. Yep. I actually completely agree, Rita Marie. From my experience, I have found that after Costa Rica, that when I interact with people that I meet, not in a judgmental way, but I'm much more able to identify when there's a common sort of thread or connection around sort of this journey of what life really is in many ways the most enriching or the most meaningful or the best way to be connected. I can kind of spot those people and I tend to gravitate towards them. And they tend to be the ones who I want to spend time with. And I also can spot people who are not doing that. And it's not that I shun them away, but if I'm
Mhm.
honest, I spend less time trying to develop those relationships because I'm sort of craving more connection. And so I think I see it. After I came back from Costa Rica, I got involved in this sort of contemporary Buddhism group. And I really like it because no judgments, no hard rules. But in many ways, it sort of does not what the connection practice does, but it pauses. It gets you to think about what is really the meaning, the importance. And it allows me in those moments when I'm there to actually apply what I know from the connection practice to what I'm even doing there. And then those
Hmm.
people in that community, when we have tea after class, they're all on a similar journey. And so they're amazing and they're great people.
Well, that's so interesting that you share that, Vincent. I didn't know that about you, but I'm not sure if I ever shared with you that when I was in Japan last time, that I had the opportunity to meet a very well-known Buddhist monk, a leader in Japan, actually, who has a radio show.
Wow.
Did I ever tell you about that?
I don't think you
No.
did.
Well, our trainer, or one of our trainers in Japan, produces this radio show for this Buddhist monk. And so she knows him and she was telling him about the connection practice. And he got excited about it and he had her do a workshop and a training with his monks and with himself. And after that, he did a radio show about the connection practice. So then, when he heard that I was coming to Japan, he wanted to meet me. And so, our connection practice trainer there arranged for a special audience. I mean, this is a man who, well, let's just say he's not accessible to the general public. And so, I was so grateful and honored to be able to have a meeting with him. And so, I actually gifted him with a connection practice board, which he immediately enjoyed. And so, then I was explaining more about the connection practice and how it helps us because of the how to, because we have these steps that take us, when we are spinning in our heads and our emotions are churning, that with each step, we get closer and closer and closer and closer to being in sync, where we can access our compassion, our wisdom, and make choices that enrich life. So I was explaining this to him, and he said, well, that in their training there of the monks, that they don't teach them the how to, that they expect that they're going to learn by their meditation practice, that they're going to discover this, that, part of their journey is the discovery of the how to, of how they are able to live from their compassion and wisdom. And then he says, that's what we do in our program. He says, but it's not efficient enough. He said, we need to take them and teach them the connection practice.
Yeah.
I was so surprised by that because he says, in our time, in other words, it's not that their training is not sufficient, that it is very effective for teaching them how to live from compassion and wisdom. But it's because of the challenges of our time that he was yearning for more efficiency so that they could be able to be of even greater service because of learning these steps of the how to of getting to our compassion and our wisdom.
No, it's so interesting that you share that story, Rita Marie, because before I had gone to Costa Rica, I had been at different times in my life, I had tried to meditate. And to be honest, I had a really hard time because I would spin. And rather than really be able to kind of center myself and not think about whatever it was, I started to perseverate on the problem and I got frustrated. And often I would stop the meditation because it became kind of painful to just A, not be able to do it, and then B, to think about that thing that I was really trying to resolve. But in some ways, I was giving it more space by, it occupying my meditations. And I agree, I've really enjoyed the contemporary Buddhism. But if I'm really being honest in our conversation today, when I close my eyes and I meditate, I actually apply the 3 steps of the connection practice because it helps me to focus and it helps me to be able to sort of center myself in a way that, we call it coherence, but it allows me to then to access what I think is that new insight that ultimately, when I come out of the meditation, I want to be left with. And so I often will feel as I'm walking out of class, I feel a lot of appreciation and joy because I've kind of used the 3 steps during the meditation to get to a place where now I've kind of reprogrammed what that experience was by doing
Mm.
the sort of heart breathing and the sort of heart feeling and the appreciation. And I haven't shared that in class because I'm not sure that that's really what they would want me to do, but I find it helpful and it's the how. And I know from my colleagues in class, my friends, that sometimes they say, oh, they're trying so hard, but something will happen that's they say is external to them in life and that they get triggered. And so sometimes I have whispered to them, well, maybe try this and see if this helps. And so
Yeah.
because I feel like it's the how, and I think we all need to know it's one thing to know that you have to fish, but if you don't know how to fish and you don't have the right tools, the life skills, then it can be frustrating because then you're standing kind of on the bridge or wherever it is that you're trying to fish and it's not happening. And you're waiting for the moment where somehow you're going to know how to do it. And for some people, maybe that comes, but for a lot of us, it could be a long time waiting on the bridge.
So true. And I don't know if you remember in the first course, the inner wellness course of the connection practice, one of the things that we talk about is how when we start with the heart, instead of starting with in meditation with silencing the mind, when we start with the heart, that because the heart is the strongest biological oscillator
Mhm.
in the body, you know,
Right.
since it is that oscillator, then it has the power to pull the brain waves for you out of that spin. So, kind of what I hear you saying is that when we're like this, and when you close your eyes and you try to meditate, and you try to stop this or just not listen to those thoughts or whatever, that it's kind of hard. And well, I wouldn't say just kind of hard, it's very hard. And that when we learn that the heart being the strongest biological oscillator in a system of oscillators. In other words, our body is a system of moving parts, oscillating parts, that in that system, then the heart has the power to pull your brain waves out of that spin. And it's so much easier. So even for people who like to meditate, in other words, I'm certainly not putting meditation down, but for many people, it is hard to, get out of this, and the heart will help you get out of it. And so people who meditate often will start with the heart coherence once they learn it. In other words, focusing down in the heart, breathing as if breathing through the heart, and then feeling appreciation for something easy for you. And so
Yes.
with those 3 steps, the heart is going to pull the brain out of that spin, and then they meditate.
That's interesting.
So I've known people that do a combo. They get into the meditation by getting out of the spin first, and then they're able to use whatever method they use to meditate.
I haven't tried it that way. I've done it sort of during the meditation. But what I do know, Rita Maria, that has happened is that after class ends, I do experience an appreciation. Oh, it's going to sound maybe a little weird, but it's the truth. I feel so open and happy and optimistic. And even things like I will notice when I'm walking home from class or going back to my car, I'll notice like certain plants or flowers and I don't normally have time in my regular life to notice those things, or at least that's what I think, that I don't have time.
Mm.
But I'll notice and they're beautiful and I feel very thankful. And I'll see things that I encounter, just in day to day life. Like maybe it's a person on the street who I smile and say hello to, or I buy a cup of coffee and I start talking to the person that, is making the coffee. And I just feel this very positive appreciation and gratitude for the world. And I think that comes from the connection practice coupled with the slowing down of taking the time for the meditation. And it kind of bolsters me. And then I experience for a period of time after that, maybe for the rest of that day, it's like a great day. It's like a really great day,
Yeah. So it sounds like you have a lasting shift
a lasting.
into a happier state of being. And we know that when we're in a happier state of being, we think more clearly. We have our best intelligence in gear when we're in that happy state of being. Yeah. All right. So I have another question for you, Vincent. I'm curious, since you're a very busy professional involved in some pretty high level decision making, I'm wondering if you've tried out the connection practice at work with colleagues or in any trying to resolve any conflicts that come up at work. Or I'm just curious if you found some ways to apply that, especially since you are a certified connection practice coach now.
It's interesting. I haven't Rita Marie brought it formally in a way that's transparent. If I'm honest, I've been a little
Mhm.
afraid to do that because I worry about sort of the formality of the setting where I am. But I want to share this because this is 100% the truth. After coming back from Costa Rica, I work with a team of colleagues who I work very closely with them, and we have hard work that has many, many positives, but it also has challenges. And I think one of the things that recently happened to me was that I had sort of, what many people consider a 360, where people get to provide input on what kind of leader you are and what kind of manager you are. And I was worried about it because I didn't know what people would say. Sometimes when you're so busy and you're sort of rushing, you don't have the time, or you believe that you don't have the time to really connect with people, which really matters in any kind of relationship, including work. But what was really amazing about the feedback that I received, I just had the meeting this earlier this week, was that people said that they really enjoyed working with me and that they found me to be a hard worker. And yes, I was busy, but they felt that I supported them and that I was tuned into what mattered to them. And I credit Rita Marie, the connection practice, for that because in my work, I work a lot in the healthcare space. We're so busy and we're notorious for neglecting ourselves, and inadvertently we can neglect others because we're sort of going, going, going. And I was kind of amazed that there was such strong sentiment about how much people enjoyed kind of our team and that they felt like we were connected and that they could be honest and open. And that was powerful. I actually got emotional when I was getting the feedback because I didn't realize. And that's been a shift in me because I've been much more intentional with checking in with people and with also applying when I have an immediate reaction. I'll stop and I'll sort of think about, how can I kind of open myself up to really trying to view things differently and feel differently. And I want to be careful because I said, that I stop and think, but actually that's not true. I stop and feel, and then
Uh-huh.
I imagine not only myself, but the other person or people, and it leads to kind of a different approach. And so then when I do talk to the person or I come out of my office, I'm not in the same place. And so I'll say, "Hey, can we talk for a second?" And it's like a totally different outcome.
Hmm. Yeah. So you're able to make that shift.
I make the
It
shift.
sounds like. Yeah, make the shift. Yeah.
It's not as natural for me, Marie. I still need this privacy of my office to kind of get myself, you know, in that shift place, but
Hmm.
I know what I have to do. And I know that I need to pause before I engage, go into sort of my own three-step process for coherence. And then I have a plan and then I'm able to engage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense, Vincent. Excuse me. I remember you said that you've worked some with Latino
Yes.
adolescents, right?
Yes.
Especially boys. Can
Yes.
you tell me a little bit about that and how you think the connection practice could help people,
Yes.
teenagers that are growing up and really don't have a clue about how to manage their inner lives?
Boy, that's such a great question to me because I've spent my entire career, which is close to 30 years, working with families and mostly with Latino families of adolescents and their parents. And I often work in what I would call resource poor settings. So these are families that live in economically disadvantaged communities. And what I've loved about it is that they want the same things that any family wants, but they have many more stressors and there are many more things external to their life that affect their lives. And then within their homes, because of those stressors, it's harder to manage reactions, to cope, to feel a sense of being sort of grounded, to feel connected to yourself and to others. And conflict can emerge, especially when there isn't enough money to pay for the rent, or there's something that is lacking. Maybe we don't have a winter coat. Maybe we don't have enough food. And these are definitely tough situations that unfortunately are all over the United States and in many parts of the world. But what I think is great about the connection practice, why I think it would be helpful, is that often young people that I work with, they internalize those experiences that something is wrong with them, that somehow they are to blame or at fault, or that they've got, kind of this mark on themselves that says they're not good enough, or they're not, valuable enough, or, that their needs don't really matter. I think what's great about the connection practice is that it allows them to regulate their emotions. It allows them to be able to articulate their needs, and it allows others in their lives, hopefully a loving adult, a parent, or someone in their life that is in their corner, to be able to respond and to help them to have those needs be met and to find a path together to move forward. To me, the connection practice would also work well in a family dynamic where families were using it to have conversations and to have shared experience of working through skills to, improve their decision making, to get into touch more so with their feelings and, how others are feeling, and to ultimately resolve conflicts.
Right. And, as you were talking about that in families, another way that we use the connection practice is to get more juice out of our celebrations. That, when we have really positive things happen, that we use the connection practice to talk about our positive feelings and our met needs,
Mm,
and that's something that families could really use to really celebrate more, to make those celebrations more than just a superficial level, but to go a little deeper with it so that it connects them even more. It kind of reminds me of how my husband relates to the grandchildren. When he gets together with the grandchildren, he will often ask about their thorns and roses. Tell me about like your day. What was your thorn today? What was your rose today? So that, there's a nice balance there between, dealing with negative emotions and our challenges that come up, but also really taking time to celebrate what's going right in our lives. And so, the connection practice has the way to do both of those, to take care of our thorns and our roses.
I really like that, Rita Marie, because so many of the families that I've worked with for the past 30 years, they have what they believe are more thorns than roses, but they actually
Right.
have roses as well. And I think creating the space to allow that to be recognized and then to be celebrated is really important, particularly when life is tough because of some of the things that I shared earlier.
Right. Right. Sometimes it just looks so bleak that that's all you can see. Yeah, I know. And maybe my husband does that with his grandchildren because when he was a young Latino boy,
Yeah.
that he had some tough times too. You
Mhm.
know, he had a really big family and he used to believe that somehow he got into the wrong life. He would use his imagination, fantasize that somehow this was the wrong family because this was too hard.
Oh,
So I've heard this story from my wonderful husband. And actually, one of the things that we learn to do in the connection practice in an advanced course that I haven't had a chance to offer to you yet is that we identify core needs, and that's different than main needs. When we do the connection practice, we identify our main need in any given situation, but we also have what we call the core needs, and those are needs that are formed out of trauma and out of difficulties. And they're the kind of need that feels like it can never get met. Like some people feel like their need for love can never be met
mhm,
because it was formed out of childhood that they didn't feel loved, and then it just seems like they repeat that experience over and over again in life, that they can't
mhm,
get that need for love met, for
mhm.
example.
Yeah.
Well, because of the connection practice, Ricardo and I know my beloved husband, Ricardo. that using the connection practice in our relationship, we each identified our core needs, things that happened to us in our childhoods. And for Ricardo, as it turned out, his core need was fun.
Wow.
Yeah, because growing up, he and all the other kids had to work in the summertime when other kids were on summer vacation. They were picking beans,
Mhm.
or doing other hard work or working in the orchards, picking fruit. And so he felt like he never got to have a fun childhood. And so the wonderful thing about that is when we can learn that about our partners or people we care about, or even grown children, what their core needs are that were formed out of trauma. Anyway, then we can be really proactive in seeing what we can do to meet those core needs. So when we came to Costa Rica and Ricardo couldn't play racquetball anymore because of problems with his knee, I suggested that we try pickleball. And at first he said, "Oh, no, that's, I don't think much of that sport." But I knew he needed fun, is my point. I know my husband needs to have some fun every day
Mhm.
because of that trauma in his childhood. And he doesn't realize that when he doesn't get fun, he gets really down. And so, I get proactive about finding things for him that are fun. And so that's why I said, well, let's try pickleball. Well, now that's one of the main fun things in our lives. And
Mhm.
also our dog, Molly.
Mhm.
I knew that, Ricardo would have fun with the dog. And so this is what I'm saying. Just another benefit of the connection practice that I haven't shared with you yet is getting really clear on another human being's core need, somebody you love, and then being proactive in meeting that need. It's made a huge difference in our relationship, in my marriage.
I mean, that's so profound, Rita Marie, and I was sort of feeling it as you were describing it and sort of the importance and meaning of that. I will say to you and to those that are listening, I look forward to when that course is offered. I think it makes a lot of sense to me that if you can figure out what your core needs are and then the people in your life that you really love and care about, that's sort of the best place to be because it means that you can nurture those relationships at a very high level. I love
That's exactly right. Well, Vincent, our time is coming to a close, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you really are wanting to share, any other way that, you've connected the dots in your life about the connection practice.
I think, Rita Marie, the only thing I'd like to share is I know that some folks may be viewing this and maybe you are on the fence, you're not sure, you're wondering, will I fit in? Will I be accepted? Is this for me? Maybe you see, you know, Rita Marie and I as, being somehow different. But honestly, I was not different. I was, sharing many of the same experiences that I think many people share. And it has been important for my life, both personally and also in terms of how I interact in my professional space with others, with people in general. And so I would say, give it a shot and come with an open heart. And I think that I'm fairly certain that an open heart is definitely going to lead to positive things in your life and the life of others.
Thank you, Vincent. Well, that's certainly my experience with you.
Likewise.
The way that we connect heart to heart is a treasure, really, and just so delighted that you have recently joined our board and getting the experience of being with other people that are as committed as you are to the connection practice. That's a whole nother level of joy, at least it is for me,
It's been great.
uh,
It's been one. Yes.
to see it all come together in our board meetings and everybody's ideas for bringing it out into the world. So,
Yes.
so grateful for that.
I feel the same.
All right, my dear friend, thank you. I so appreciate your good wisdom and look forward to seeing you at the next board meeting.
I see you next week. Remy, while I have your ear for 1 second, I would
Yeah.
like to say to you, the person who I also really have found very is an amazing person is Ellen. I really like Ellen. And,
Uh-huh.
I haven't talked to her in a while because she was coaching me when I was getting certified, but she's a gem and she's very special.
Well, thank you for saying that. And that's so true. So, Vincent, you're talking about Ellen Anderson, our director of education, who has been volunteering for our nonprofit for going on 10 years now. She's just a huge gift, and working with her is always a joy. And it's that tender, loving care that she gives every single person that comes to learn the connection practice. So, so, so grateful for her. Thank you for mentioning
Thank
that.
you. Take good care, Rita Marie. Be well, okay? We'll be in
All
touch.
right. All right.
Take care.
All
Bye,
right. You
bye,
too.
everybody.
Bye bye.